Remember, you can find this deck and many others on our website at kitchentablemeta.com. Click Decks on the homepage to choose from any of our competitive lists, and don't forget, you can download a PDF of each deck to take with you to your next tournament.
Hey guys, how's it going? Dusty here, bringing you a special deck profile for my third place Gen Con deck, Vegeta Hand Destruction. Vegeta Hand Destruction, my favorite deck. I cannot explain to you guys how excited I am to be doing this deck as my first deck profile. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the best decks in the format, and for good reason. If you're not playing one of the few leaders or cards that can counterplay this deck strategy, then you're in for a world of hurt. And the reason why is because this deck wants to awaken early with Vegeta, it wants to stall out the game, discard your hand with the Broly cards, and then win a late game with Beerus General Destruction. And the deck can easily do that if you're not prepared to break the stall or get card advantage. Now, one of the big reasons why this deck can do its strategy so consistently is because of its leader, Vegeta. Now, Vegeta is, without a doubt, one of the best leaders in the game. And I get asked a lot why I run Vegeta over Broly in this deck as a leader. And one of the simplest ways I can put it is that he just does Broly's job better. And what I mean by that is he can discard a card out of your hand in a way by using his critical ability. Now, once he uses the critical ability and hits you and you have to discard your life, it's essentially you discarding. Now, a lot of people will tell me, well, why, what happens if they block or they use a card as a combo? Well, that's still card disadvantage. That's still as if they would have discarded a card. To make matters better, or I guess you could say worse for Broly, Vegeta always can awaken. He doesn't need any other cards or any other ways to awaken. He can just do that off of his ability. And also, Vegeta isn't reliant on any cards like Broly's Ring. And maybe the biggest reason why Vegeta is better is because Vegeta can attack battle cards. Broly not being able to attack battle cards is a huge downside, and honestly, in my opinion, makes him one of the worst leaders in the game. Now, once Vegeta does flip, he becomes a defensive powerhouse. He has 15,000 power like all the other leaders, but he can do it so quickly that it stalls out the game very fast for your opponent. And then your opponent has to try to use cards out of their hand to buff their cards up to deal damage to Vegeta. And if they're doing that, then they're essentially discarding more cards out of their hand and playing into your plan. And so Vegeta, in my opinion, just does Broly's job better in every single department. Now, one thing to keep in mind, we are playing Vegeta in a more control style when we play this deck, and so it's okay to just take the card on your turn and not attack. We want to leave our opponent with as much health as we can, especially when they're playing colors like red or green, because we don't want to give them less life so they can awaken with cards like Kaba and Furious Yell Vegeta. Okay, so let's move on to the actual battle cards in the deck. And first, we'll start off with the one-drop Broly, Dawn of the Rampage. Now, this card is a backbone in the deck, and almost all of your Broly all your Broly battle cards need this card to evolve onto in order to get the discard effect. So it's very important to protect this card. And what I mean by that is if you're playing against yellow or red, any caller that could put pressure on Broly early, even the Beerus leader card, try not to play this card out or into a threat that could kill you, like Goldo or Fickle Destruction, and instead wait until you can play one or two of this card out at a time, so it makes it less likely that your opponent can kill it. If you have to play this card out on turn one and you're against one of those matchups, make sure that you search out another one-drop Broly instead of one of your combos, so if it does die, you can still play it out. Because remember, even when you do play ejection on turn two, you still get that extra mana to play another one out, so it's possible to play one on both turns leading up to your Bio Broly turn. Moving on, we're going to move on to Human Shield Krillin. Now, this card I used to run 4 of, and I've since moved it down to 2. Now, the reason why I run 2 of this card is so that I can make my Goku, my 6-drop Goku, have triple strike. It's also a decent card in the combo phase because it is one of the few cards we have in the deck that's a 0-costed 5,000. Now, it is a blocker, but I rarely use it as a blocker, and even most of the time use it as energy. But if you want to cut this card out, that's fine. I mean, there can be a lot of arguments, but I just like having this card in there for the fun shenanigans you can do with the 6-drop Goku. Giving that Goku triple strike has won me more than one game. Moving on, we're going to go to Energy Boosted Majin Buu. Now, there's not much to say here. Buu replaces himself. He's a fantastic combo card. He's even good for blue energy late in the game. So, I mean, honestly, there's not much this card doesn't do. If you're playing a blue deck, it's really hard to convince me not to run 4 of this card. Moving on, we're going to go to Boost Attack Piccolo, and almost another auto include. If you're no matter what deck you're playing, you should always make sure that you include 4 of your 0 cost plus 10,000 card. We're running Vegeta, and so because of that, we're running Piccolo. Next up is Ultimate Judgment Jocko. Now, I will say with this card, it is not quite as good as I thought it was when I first ran it. Now, when I ran this card in my last tournament, I ran 4 of instantly. I saw this card, I was like, here's an answer to the poor combo phase that this deck has. Unfortunately, I didn't read the card close enough, and there's a couple reasons why this card isn't quite as good as I thought originally. Number one, it has to do its effect. Its effect isn't a may, it is a must. So because of that, oftentimes you get put in this weird situation where you're forced to bounce your opponent's boos or bomas, and it just like ends up giving them card advantage, which is something that we don't want to do. The second thing this card does is it doesn't help us against any of the combo cards that have effects. So for example, if we have to bounce the Gotenks green combo card or the red combo card that gives a card double strike, for example. Even if we bounce that card, the card will still get the effect. So it's a terrible play in that situation. So because of that, I cut the card down from 4 to 2. I still think the card is good, and I still think there's certain situations where this card will lead to a blowout. I'm just not sure that 4 is the right decision. Next up is Broly the Unstoppable Hero. Now this is the promo Broly and is a fantastic card. This card is very good. However, almost every time I play this card against an opponent or start showing an opponent the deck, if they ask, they see this card and they're immediately upset. They're like, oh crap, I don't have the promos. I can't run this deck. Now, the thing is, if you don't have the promos, that's fine. Honestly, there's very few times where I even play this card during a game. The card is in there to protect Broly, your 1-drop Broly in certain situations, mainly when you don't get objection. And it's also very good late game. You can use it to evolve over top of your 6-drop Broly if you need to kill an in-game threat like Vados or 7-drop Beerus. But most of the time, he just is an energy. I mean, this card is very good in certain situations, but it is situational. And if you don't have this card, do not feel like that you can't play the deck. You can replace this card with a couple different cards that I'll talk about later, but just please don't let not having this card discourage you from trying out this deck. Next up is Energy Boost Beerus. Now, it's no surprise that I finally put this card in my deck. Beerus is my favorite character in the show, and this is one of my favorite cards in the game. Now, originally, I had 4 of these in the sideboard, the last tournament I played in, but I found myself in almost every single matchup sideboarding in at least 2 of them. And so I decided I might as well just put 2 in the main board. And honestly, I haven't regretted it. This card is fantastic. Now, one of the downsides of this card is it does cost 2 blue, which might not sound like a lot, and honestly it isn't. But the thing is, with this deck, what we want to do is play 1 blue energy and then play up to 5 green energy, and that way we can make sure that we can 4 green energy. That way we can make sure we can evolve our 6-drop Broly on turn 5. So the problem with this card is if we play it on turn 5, then we can't evolve our Broly. So just keep that in mind. This card is extremely strong, and the things it can do heavily outweigh its downside. But just remember, if your goal is to play Broly on turn 5, then having this card in your hand is probably going to be dead. So just keep that in mind. Next up is the backbone of the deck. Rampaging Lifeform Bio Broly is a absurd card, and honestly, if it wasn't for this card, I don't think the deck would work at all. So essentially, what this card will do is when you play it, you have to evolve. Your opponent has to choose 2 cards out of their hand and discard them. Now, because of this card's, effect that we have to evolve, we have to make sure that, like I said, protect our 1-drop Broly. But if we do, this card just takes over the game very, very quickly. And oftentimes what I'll do is if I evolve this card and take 2 cards out of my opponent's hand, I'll attack the next turn hit them for 2, and then just evolve another version on top of this to take those 2 cards right back out of their hand again. Now, I do get asked a lot, can you evolve this card on top of itself? And the answer is absolutely. It does have the Broly tagline, so you can evolve it with itself. Up next is Awakening Rage Sun Goku. Now, this card is, I think, criminally underplayed. Goku is fantastic, and he actually makes up for one of our downsides in the deck. Now, since we're attacking the hand so often and trying to stall out our opponent, often we kind of ignore the battlefield. And so a lot of 1-drops and 2-drops will get kind of clogged up on the field. And so Rage Sun Goku takes care of that. You play him out, you can kill up to 6 energy worth of battle cards. This card's also extremely strong against Vados decks. If Vados attacks twice, you can play this card out, usually kill both of their battle cards, and pressure the Vados with the attack. Again, if you do have Krillin in your drop zone, this card does get triple strike, and I've won more than one game by kind of sneaking that play in there. I'll attack with Vegeta, combo him up with Krillin, and then play him out this Goku, kill any of their blockers if I have to, and then swing in for the win. So this card, I think, again, is criminally underplayed, and I think it should be seeing a lot more play in a lot of different decks. Up next is our 6-drop Broly. Now, this card is, fantastic. It's absolutely absurd, and in my opinion, is one of the best super rares in the game. Now, what a really cool thing that Broly does here that I think a lot of people don't understand is that his discard effect is random. So you have to discard cards at random out of your hand. It's the only discard effect in the game that does that, and because of that, it makes him extremely, extremely powerful. There's been a game I played against one of my buddies where, I was dead if he had a counter in his hand. I was like, if he has a counter, I lose. I'll play out this Broly. And I did. I played out the Broly. I got lucky, hit his only counter in hand, and won the game because of that. Now, if I would have used the Bioform Brolys, then he could have just simply chose not to discard a counter, and I would have had no hope to winning. Also, another thing to keep in mind with this card is because its power is so high, a lot of times you lead to discarding more than just 2 cards out of their hand, because if you play this out, discard 2, attack, they usually have to use 1 or 2 combo cards to stop the attack from doing damage. So it's not unreasonable to think this card could result in them discarding up to 4 or 5 cards. Next is my boy Beerus, General of Demolition. Now, I have to admit, one of the main reasons this deck came to fruition is because I wanted to make this card even better. I mean, I'll never forget the first time I saw this card, I was just like, okay, this maybe is one of the best finishers I've ever seen in a game. I mean, his effect is extremely powerful. What he'll do is if he attacks and you don't have 2 cards in hand, he wipes the your opponent's battle field and the energy row. And that is extremely, extremely powerful. To make matters worse, he also has triple strike, so you can easily finish the game with him. Now, I will say one disclaimer is I actually lost my only game at Gen Con because I played Beerus out on turn 7, I attacked my opponent, they drew 3 cards off the triple strike, they awakened the next turn, drew 5 cards, and then they comboed out with their leader with all 5 cards were 0 cost, unfortunately, and they had like a 65,000 leader, and it killed me because I was tapped out. Now, but just because he costs 7, please try not to play him out on 7. We want to play him out on turn 8, so we have a mana open for a counter. Like I said, for that Gen Con game, I had 3 counters in hand, and because I was tapped out, I just lost. So it's very unfortunate, but it can't happen with this card because the effect is so powerful. A lot of times you just get excited and you want to swing out and kill your opponent's field, but just try to hold that excitement for one more turn. All right, so now let's move on to the extra cards. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this deck is we do run a couple more extra cards than is normal, I think. But because of that, we're kind of weak in the combo phase. But trust me, it's really worth it. All of our extra cards are very good. And so to start this out, we start out with Full Power Energy. Now, this counter spell, I think, is a little underrated. I don't hear very many people talking about it. And often, even in the Broly decks, I see people trying to run like 3 of them. Now, the thing is the effect on this card is extremely powerful in the current meta. There's a lot of powerful 1-drops in the game. And this card not only can stop a 15,000 attacker from pressuring your hero, your leader, it can also kill a 1-drop threat with its secondary effect. And those threats can be Kaba, they can be Broly's, like we just talked about, and there's a lot of other effects, like even the Goku's or Goldos, like blockers. So it can even open up, attacks on your next turn. This card's super versatile, and trust me, it's very important. Moving on, we run the 4 of the blue counter. Now, a lot of people ask me why I run 8 counters in the deck, and the main reason I can say is because, again, our win condition on turn 8 is to play to play out Beerus, and then we want to attack out and destroy their field, destroy their energy. And in that scenario, really the only thing our opponent can pressure us with is the leader. And so if we have a counter after that play, we essentially just time walk the opponent. They try to attack with their leader, and we just counter it, go back to our next turn, and finish up the game. And so running all 8 counters, in my opinion, is very important because of that. Next up is Senzu Bean. So there's no surprise here. If you run the blue deck, you should probably have Senzu Bean in it. I mean, there's probably an argument to be made that you can just run 4 Senzu Bean in any deck and just use one of them as an energy to play the other one, and that's probably not out of the realm of possibility. This card is absolutely bonkers, and it is extremely good on offense and defense, which really makes this card have no downside. It untaps mana, energy, and like I said, it's very good on offense and defense. This is also a very important card for me when I'm playing against Vados. This is usually how I survive that Vados turn. All right, and so the last card is Objection. And I know I get this all the time. People ask me, they're like, hey, Dusty, why are you playing Objection? I thought Objection was bad. And what I always tell them is, okay, Objection's not bad, it's just balanced. And so what I mean is, it has a downside, sure. Like, using Objection is sort of card disadvantage. However, we're lucky because we're playing Vegeta, and Vegeta can easily draw 2 to 3 cards a turn, and because of that, he kind of makes up for the card disadvantage of this card. But what this card does is allows us to have energy advantage, which is extremely important because we can play cards like our Bio Broly a turn earlier, which means we can take 2 more cards out of our opponent's hand a turn early. Now, why that's really important is because one of the cards that can beat us is a card called Result of Training. And what this card does is allows our opponent to awaken. And so a lot of times if we have to wait till turn 4 to use our discard effect, we can't take a result out of their hand. We can't discard their entire hand essentially before they can play the card. But with Objection, we can. And so that's why Objection is so important in this deck. All right, guys, so that's it for my first deck profile for Vegeta Hand Destruction. Now, I will have a video coming out tomorrow that will cover the sideboard for this deck and a matchup guide to kind of tell you guys how I defeat some of the more tough matchups like Vegeta, Ginyu, and Champa. So if that's something that interests you guys, tune in tomorrow and check it out. So thank you guys again so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.